I can't sleep without a nightlight. It's not something out of the usual. I've never had a sleep paralysis before or anything. I just keep imagining something staring at me in the dark. Sometimes it feels like that from the second I turn the lights off, and other times I wake up in the middle of the night to that feeling, so I just prefer to keep the room lit. I've been together with my boyfriend for 3 years, and he has trouble sleeping with the lights on, so we just sleep with the lights turned off, and if I get too scared I can just turn them on. One night I was sleeping over at his place, and I had asked him if we could just keep the lights on because I was having like a bad feeling, but he insisted that we would try turning the lights off. And it was fine. I slept soundly right up until I woke up with a shock. My eyes just sprung open and looked directly at the corner of my boyfriend's room. It was completely dark except some light coming in from a very small window. He lives in a basement and only has that one small window, and I saw a figure standing there. It was the most basic scary thing you could see, some abnormally tall man in a trench coat with a top hat. He had thin white hair going down to his shoulders and he was just staring at me. At first I just looked. I was sure that I was imagining him. I'm scared of the dark, for God's sake, of course I see things. But I suddenly got the same bad feeling and decided to turn on the lights anyway, and just as expected he was gone. This story in itself isn't the scary part. I don't think it's out of the usual at all, but what comes next makes me think about it from time to time. I woke up one day to a bunch of text from my boyfriend being like I think I had sleep paralysis, and so he called and continued to tell me how he had difficulty sleeping and just kept moving around his bed, until he opened his eyes and turned his body forwards the corner where I had seen the top hat man. And right there a tall man with a top hat and thin white hair to his shoulders were crouching down right next to my boyfriend's head, staring him in the eyes. My boyfriend had screamed and jumped to turn on the lights, and as he did the figure was gone. He didn't think anything of it other than that it was scary, but I had never told my boyfriend about what I had seen. I had never mentioned the top hat man in a trench coat. I know it's a very normal thing to see, but it was still a scary coincidence that we had seen the exact same man. I never told my boyfriend that I had also seen him, and I never did see him again. I don't think my boyfriend did either, as far as I know.
I live in a town where all the houses look similar and everyone knows each other, so there's no restrictions as to how late you can come home because it's safe. My town is in the middle of Canadian wilderness, and there has never been a time where someone passed through it, mostly because it would be a major detour in order to get here. I play football for one of the 2 high schools we have here, and since I'm a senior I've been made captain. Being captain of the team is fun, but it means I have to stay late to pick up equipment from the field after practice. Our football field is big and has lights all around. On the far end there's a huge forest, and on the side closest to the road is a parking lot and bleacher seats. This story takes place when I had to stay late after practice one day. Usually my girlfriend waits for me so we can go home together, but that day she was sick and couldn't make it to school. So I was left cleaning alone, and I could have sworn I saw somebody in the trees, but that would be unreasonable, so I brushed it off. After I picked everything up, I put it in the supply closet and went to grab my bag that was way closer to the far end than I remembered putting it. I jogged to my bag and grabbed it and began walking to my car. I got in my car and was about to back out of the parking spot when I saw somebody getting out of the forest and into the football field. I realized I didn't lock the far end cage door, and I knew if an animal ended up getting into the field, I would get in trouble. So I got back out and tried to spot the person I had seen earlier, but I couldn't see them. I sprinted to the gate with the coach's keys and clicked the lock in place. Once I made it back to my car, the first thing I did was lock the car doors. I checked the time, which was 11:48 p.m., and left the parking lot. The roads were empty at this time of night, so I could speed home if I wanted, but I liked to look at houses on the short drive to my house. One house caught my eye. It belonged to a young couple who had just graduated high school. I knew they didn't have any kids, so I was surprised to see a little boy sitting on their front steps. But then again, I didn't want to invade anybody's privacy, so I just drove past. That was the biggest mistake I could have made, because a week later they were found dead at their house. Discovered by the mailman, who smelled something and reported it to the chief. They were found in bed with blood coming out of their ears. There were rumors at school that they were found naked, and that they were in the middle of having sex. So naturally nobody did the deed for days because they thought maybe it had something to do with that. When the autopsy came back, they found child-sized bite marks on the guy's arm, and children's shoes under their bed. Nobody could explain it, so we all just forgot about it. I've worked as an ER tech for a long time, going on 12 years now. People often ask me why I don't just go back to school and become a nurse or a phlebotomist or something if I like the environment so much. Well, A, that's a big commitment of time and money that I'm really not willing to put forth the effort for, and B, I actually like what I do. It's just the right amount of responsibility, and you don't feel like just another cog either. I know enough about medicine, and I picked up enough information on the job to help people, to tell doctors and nurses what I know concisely, and generally feel like I'm a key player in the ER team. Also, probably a smaller C, the ER is where you get the best stories. The ER is such a chaotic nexus within the hospital, and you never honestly know what's going to wander through the door. It could be a 5-car pile-up. It could be a couple of horny teens with their braces stuck together. You just never know. I've talked with Wall Street big shots, prostitutes, doctors too ashamed to go to their own hospital's ER for treatment, and even a few inmates from the state prison, though the guards don't really like you to linger. My job is usually to take vitals, get samples, ask questions, and I'm pretty good at it. So, when the orders to bring a woman down to X-ray came through the pipes, I hopped to it. The couple was young, probably in their later 20s, and the woman looked worse for wear but not too bad off. She had some cuts on her face, some more cuts, and bruises on her hands, and she kept grabbing her stomach and wincing. I told husband, the rings were a dead giveaway, that we were going to make a quick trip to radiology, and I made small talk with wife on the way there. I asked what brought her here today, and she told me meekly that it was stomach pains. When I asked her if she'd eaten anything that didn't agree with her, she said the last thing I would expect to hear. About a pound of garbage. I looked dumbfounded as we wheeled her in, and Claire and Robert helped me get her on the table. She moved like someone in immense pain, and as I followed the techs out of the room, Randall asked me if she really had a belly full of garbage. I told him I had no clue and that I guess that's what they were hoping to find out. He turned the machine on, and Claire went back in to reset the slides a few times as they took their pictures. As the images came on screen, Randall raised an eyebrow. Well, she'll have a bowel obstruction for sure. However, if she ate all that trash, I'm pretty sure that a lot of it wasn't meant to be digested. I blinked, astonished. She did, indeed, have a belly full of garbage, right down to half of a black garbage bag. Her stomach was oddly distended, and she looked as though if she'd eaten any more garbage, she would have been in danger of rupturing. Randall said he would pass these X-rays along to Dr. Yolunder, but it was likely that she was heading into surgery. As I took her back to her room, I couldn't stop myself from asking how she had come to eat garbage. I don't remember, she said honestly, I just woke up in the garbage dump. I took her back to her room and tried to go about my day, but the woman and her husband were never far from my mind. I just couldn't understand how someone could eat all that garbage and not realize it. As my day proceeded, I kept thinking about her and her garbage belly. As my shift came to an end, I saw that the pair of them were still in the ER. I clocked out and went to see if I could get some answers if they were willing. I knocked on the door, and when they invited me in, I made my request. Not to pry, ma'am, but I have been wondering about your condition all day long, and it's really been giving me fits. If you don't mind, can I ask how it happened? As it turned out, they were both willing to talk, so I sat down and heard the whole story. I had been having stomach cramps for a few days now. I hadn't been sleeping very well, and my dreams had been kind of hectic. For the past week, every dream found me in a castle where people I didn't know called me to a lavish banquet. I would eat and eat and eat and wake up with my mouth tasting terrible and my stomach rolling and heavy. I also began to suspect that I was going somewhere, sleepwalking, in the night. On more than one occasion, my sheets were dirty, and I had found footprints leading from the unlocked front door to the bedroom 3 times. My, movements were becoming alarming as well. They were larger than usual and hurt as they came out. This was confusing since my appetite was at an all-time low. I barely ate anything, constantly feeling bloated and full, and after 9 days of this, I was ready to go to the hospital myself. That's when my husband woke up to find me gone. She looked over at her husband, but he seemed hesitant at first to continue. Look, it wasn't that I suspected her of anything, okay? We've been married almost 2 years, and I could tell that something was different. She wasn't eating, she was sleeping fitfully, and I thought maybe something was going on. It just so happened that she had kicked me that night, waking me up, and I was still getting back to sleep when she suddenly got out of bed and went towards the kitchen. I expected that she just wanted a drink, but when I heard the door open, I got up to see where she had gone. Imagine my surprise to find the back door open and my wife missing. I walked the neighborhood looking for her, wondering why she had just disappeared in the middle of the night, before finally coming back home and hoping she would come back. Had she left on her own, or had someone called her? Was she sleepwalking? I was worried, but I guess that my sleepiness got the best of me after a while. When I woke up suddenly on the couch to find her snug in bed, I thought maybe I had been dreaming. When I saw the muddy trail going from the kitchen to the bedroom, though, I knew it had been no dream. She put a hand over his, and he clutched it worriedly. The two looked at each other for a minute, and I suddenly felt a little bad about intruding in their moment. These two were worried, their marriage relatively new, and it was clear that the husband also felt a little guilty about where his mind might have been going. Maybe he suspected her of some infidelity, and perhaps she suspected his suspicion as well. Meanwhile, I was suffering the next day from some intense stomach pains. I hadn't eaten much the day before than broth, so the idea that I was having stomach cramps from a cup of broth was very perplexing. I called out that day, telling my husband that I wasn't feeling well, and just laid in bed. I was racked with stomach cramps and slept fitfully for most of the day. I think he sensed how sick I was. When he got home, he tried to ply me with tea and soup that I just couldn't keep down. I felt like I wanted to vomit, but all my body would do was dry heave. It felt like something was stopping it from coming up, and I really wished I could just flush myself out and get rid of this pain. I was glad when she fell asleep that night, but I was still on high alert to see if she would leave. I lay in bed, trying to get still but not too sleepy. I just kept watching her, waiting to see what she would do. When midnight rolled around, she did indeed slide from bed and head for the kitchen. I let her get a little head start, coming out of bed as she came to the kitchen, but when I heard the back door open, I was off and running. That night's dream was the most vivid yet. I had gone to the table, hearing the voices call for me, but the table was bare. The plates were empty, and I was just so hungry that I scattered them off the table in a red rage. I was starving, and these voices had called me in here for nothing. When I was done, I heard them calling me again. I remembered that maybe they had called me deeper into the place before, but I couldn't remember clearly. I just went, I just ran, and the castle seemed to fly around me. She had thrown the garbage can over, scattered some papers off the counter, and I just kind of looked around at the carnage. Had the trash can maybe been turned over yesterday too? I didn't have more than a few seconds to take it all in because the back door was open, and I saw one slipper-clad foot disappearing around the side of the house. Now, I ran track in high school, and I've tried to keep up with it, so I don't put on what a lot of my friends call married weight. When I tell you that it was all I could do to keep up with her, I'm not joking. She was damn near running on 4 legs, eating up the ground, and she made her way to the last place I would have ever imagined, the city dump. I can't explain it. In my dream, the voices were calling me, the smells were wafting around my nose in an intoxicating cloud, and I was so hungry that I just couldn't stop myself. I was sprinting, running flat out, and something was egging me on as it tried to get me to the food as quickly as it could. Suddenly, I was in a banquet hall, a hall full of tables piled high with the most delicious food. Joints of meat, bowls of stew, fresh salads with nuts and dressing, puddings and cakes, and everything I loved most. I was drooling, I could almost feel it running down my face, and I ran towards those tables like a woman possessed. I stopped for a few seconds when I saw where she was going. It was the last place I would have ever expected. What the hell could she possibly want here? That's probably why she had such an opportunity to do what she did. I felt like I knew what was coming next, but I asked him to continue anyway. This had become a train wreck, a disaster, but my lizard brain needed to watch until the last car came to a stop. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We watch the accident until it's finally over, too late for us to stop it, and then we try to pick up the pieces. She went to the nearest trash pile and just started eating. As I ate in my dream, I could feel all those wonderful foods filling my mouth with their tastes. I devoured them. I ravenous for more, and just kept eating. I could feel people behind me in the dream, applause and cheers from the people who had been calling me as I filled my belly, but one of them was different. My hair prickled as one of them called my name, trying to make me stop, and their applause changed to jeers as that one shade approached. I called her name, I couldn't think of anything else to do, but she just kept devouring that slop. She would tear some of the bags open, some of them she would just rip open with her teeth, and she was chewing up anything that went into her mouth. Rotten food, paper, glass, anything that went in went down, and she was eating like it was the last meal of her life. I ran towards her, shouting her name and calling for her to stop, and when I tried to put a hand on her, she turned and snarled at me, surprising me and making me take a step away. Whatever it was, it had touched me, and everything inside me roared to the surface to stop it. I was eating, filling my belly, and this creature was jealous of my good fortune. I turned and screeched at it, and for a moment, it moved away. Then it grabbed me, pulling me away from the buffet at hand, and I struggled and screamed, striking out with my arms and legs as I tried to fight it off. I was put off for a second, but then I grabbed her and tried to pull her away. She was going to hurt herself, I could already see cuts on her face and hands, and I didn't want her to puncture her esophagus or her stomach or something. I dragged her away from the garbage pile, and that's when I saw the others. He spoke like someone who's realized he's been surrounded by a pack of wolves, and I just couldn't help myself. Others. It appeared it wasn't just my wife who'd come out to feed. There were dozens of them, haggard shadows that lumbered amidst the trash. They hissed at me, screamed at me like angry cats, and at that moment, I did something I had never done. I looked at my wife, eyes glazed over, body fighting me with every fiber of its being, and I slapped her. I'm ashamed to say it, but I slapped her. She came awake shakily, disoriented, unsure where she was, and I just picked her up and booked it. The hissing people, those garbage shades, followed after us, but I didn't look back, and I didn't stop running until we were already inside the house with the door locked. I shook my head a little, but it was almost 9 when we finally admitted you. Why did it take you so long to get here? I didn't mean to sound judgy, but I guess I must have because the husband bristled a little. Well, we had to wait for the goddamn garbage people to leave, for one. She covered his hand again, trying to get him to calm down a little before she continued. I don't remember anything before we got home. I came to fully on the couch, my husband peeking through the windows as my stomach heaved and my body ached. I coughed up a piece of glass then, a long red shard that felt like it had cut my throat on the way up, and he turned as I started crying. I asked him what had happened, and he started telling me about how he'd followed me to the dump. He told me about the garbage people, probably the ones who'd been calling me this whole time, and I just sat on the couch and tried to process it all. I felt like I wanted to throw up again, but I couldn't bring anything up. I was scared and hurting, and I just wanted it all to end. I don't know why they wanted my wife so badly, but about 6 of them haunted our yard for the next few hours. They skulked, making it impossible to get a good look at them. They looked ragged, their hair shaggy and their clothes mostly cast-offs, and if I'd seen them on the street, I'd have thought they were homeless. They never approached the house, but they did hide in the bushes, under our cars, and anywhere else they could lurk without being seen. I explained what I had seen to my wife, all the while trying to keep an eye on these people. When the sun started coming up, they finally fled, and after I was sure they were gone, I loaded her into the car and brought her here. The receptionist just wrote down stomach aches when I told her why we were there, so it took several hours of waiting in the lobby before they would admit us. Even then, I don't think they considered us a priority until after the X-ray. I knew he was right, but before I could say so, the door was pushed open, and 3 orderlies came in with a stretcher. They loaded her frantically, saying they needed to get her to ultrasound immediately. Something had come up on the blood work, and they needed to make sure everything was okay after they had hastily given her an X-ray. When I asked the nurse in the hall what was going on, she said they had ordered the X-ray before discovering that the woman was pregnant. That's what's been bugging me since I left the hospital. Her husband had seemed just as surprised by her pregnancy as she was. She had an ovarian cyst when she was very young. The doctors claimed she would never be able to become pregnant. I don't understand this, he had said, looking extremely shell-shocked. Personally, I'm left with another concern. What sort of baby gives his mother cravings for garbage? Like I said, you never know what you'll see in the ER when you clock in.